Hi guys, and the main purpose of today's video is to showcase this all new Florida Link from Otto Link and the Babbitt factory. And on my right and left knee here we have two other very similar looking Otto Links. I've got my own Retro Revival Super D New York, which I'm going to try in comparison to this one, and also just a sort of standard stock Super Tone Master, also by way of comparison, so we really can put this new mouthpiece into context. So the idea is that Otto Link, or the Babbitt factory last year, decided to reenact the Florida design, of course kind of famous in the 60s. It came out when the Otto Link factory moved to Florida, and then some years later they came out with this specific Florida model that only lasted a few years really, because when they relocated to Indiana in Elkhart, they just moved to just a standard Otto Link design and the Florida concept was dropped. But in its heyday, this was a really popular mouthpiece, and many people are often looking for old examples of Floridas just to get that kind of classic sound that they delivered, which was namely a bright sound because it was famous for having this built-up baffle just in the top ½ centimetre here, which made such a difference to the output of the sound. You know, Otto Links are really known for having that lovely warm, tubby, kind of jazzy sound, and as soon as they streamlined the design with the Florida element, the sound became much more contemporary, more poppy. It had a real projection to it, and that was very desirable, you know, as playing styles developed through the 60s and 70s and so on. So it's a nice idea for the Babbitt factory to bring out and, you know, pay tribute to the original Florida design. And I've really enjoyed playing on this. It's quite different, I should say at the outset, to these two guys I've got down here. So it's going to be a really interesting comparison. And considering the price point of this mouthpiece in comparison to the regular Otto Link, you're probably going to be quite surprised at the tonal differences. So let's start by having a bit of a blast on this mouthpiece. Once I've done that, I'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll move on to comparing the other two mouthpieces. Well, I think this is such an attractive mouthpiece. It just delivers so much flexibility. The response is great. It really is quite a different beast altogether from a standard Super Tone Master, which I'm going to demonstrate in a minute. But just the fact that it's got that raised baffle in there just allows the sound to ooze out. And naturally it's got this kind of focus and brightness to it. It's what I describe as a nice edge as opposed to a nasty edge, which is kind of present throughout the whole range. You know, even at a sort of medium volume, you can hear it kind of buzzing away there, as opposed to fluffing away, which you can get with certain Otto Links, as you might hear in a minute. So it's amazing the difference a little bit of baffle can make. I think we're only talking 4 or 5 millimeters, and the articulation that you gain from having that extra material right here does make such a big difference. So let's move on to the other two mouthpieces. I'm going to start with the Super Tone Master, just so you've got a base point, and then I'm going to come back to this one again, and then I'm going to move on to the Retro Revival mouthpiece. So as you can hear, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, they are three completely different beasts, but largely I would say the middle one and the last one, that's Florida, and my own retro revival here, are on another level in terms of performance and what you can do with the mouthpiece, because I really found the standard Supertone Master quite limiting. The basic sound is very nice, particularly in the lower register. It's got a nice kind of beefy huskiness to it, but it only does one thing. The moment you push it, it doesn't really change character in its tonality, particularly upstairs in the upper register. When I was just hitting standard mid C's and E flats, the sound was kind of very stuffy and kind of inward, and it just didn't want to blossom out. Whereas naturally the Florida has this immediate presence to the sound and this nice buzz, and you can really push the sound out, although it is quite a compact sound in comparison to this one here, which I suppose is like the best of all worlds, because for me it has that kind of breadth to it. It's got that sort of scope and expansive sound, but at the same time it's just got that extra dynamic kind of capability, which I love. Now this isn't a review necessarily about the retro revival, but it is worth pointing out that, you know, this is a mouthpiece that's over double the price of both of the others, which are very similar in price. And, you know, this is based on an original, absolute classic New York double ring. That's the idea of these retro revival mouthpieces. You know, these are kind of the best of the best in terms of Otto Links and all of the other classic mouthpieces that the retro revival guys model their mouthpieces on. So amazing mouthpiece. But for a production mouthpiece, I find the Florida really good, and it really surprised me because I've always struggled with just the standard Supertone Master Otto Link from the point of view that I've just described and you would have heard there. It was a real struggle. The sound was stifled just on the standard Supertone Master. Moving on to the Florida, the sound just takes on a whole new life of its own. And I always kind of see Otto Links as more jazz-based mouthpieces, and they really sit firmly in the jazz category. But when you take a Florida like this one here, I immediately think of, you know, solos like Native New Yorker from the band Odyssey. This wonderful kind of jazz sound, but with a real kind of pop edge. So it really would work in a pop context, I think, the Florida, because it's got this natural buzz in all ranges of the instrument, and the lower range as well, which allows the tenor to really come through. Whereas just the standard Link was just very kind of tubby, and although the sound was nice and warm, it would just get lost trying to play in that kind of context. So yeah, really interesting comparison. You know, they're all so different. They look identical from the outside, but the internal geometry of the three mouthpieces is sufficiently different that the results are quite different in terms of the way they all perform. And for me, as I say, the second two mouthpieces, my own retro here in the Florida, are really great examples of mouthpieces, and just not quite digging the Supertone Master for the reasons explained. I love my own retro revival. I think it's a great mouthpiece, but for half the price, this new Florida mouthpiece is brilliant, and it's really going places, I think. So I thoroughly encourage you guys to come down, check out the mouthpiece when you can, and see what you guys think.